Have you ever noticed how some people just seem so naturally confident when they speak?
Oh, absolutely.
Like they were born with a microphone in hand,
Yeah.
ready to take on the world with their words.
Right.
It can be a little intimidating, especially when you're trying to find your own voice in English.
I can definitely see that.
So today, we are diving deep into some of the myths surrounding confidence when it comes to speaking English.
Love it.
And I've got a fantastic expert here with us today to help us bust those myths wide open and uncover the truth about how we can all become more confident communicators.
I'm thrilled to be here
Yeah.
and ready to tackle those myths head on.
Now, one myth that I think a lot of us fall prey to is this idea that extroverts have some kind of natural advantage when it comes to confidence.
Oh, for sure. That's a big one.
You see those charismatic people who can effortlessly command a room and you think, well, I'm just an introvert. I guess I'm doomed to stumble over my words forever.
Right. I hear that all the time.
But is that really true?
Not even close. It's such a misconception.
So what's the reality then when it comes to introverts and confidence?
Well, introverts actually have their own unique strengths when it comes to communication.
Oh, interesting.
They tend to be incredibly thoughtful and deliberate in their speech.
So it's not just about being the loudest voice in the room.
Not at all. It's about being clear, concise, and impactful.
Okay, so tell me more about how introverts can really shine in their communication.
Well, they often excel at things like active listening, asking insightful questions, and really thinking through their ideas before they speak.
That makes sense.
It's like they process information deeply and then present it in a way that's both engaging and thought-provoking.
I love that. So being an introvert isn't a barrier to confident speaking,
Absolutely not. It's just a different style of communication.
and a very powerful one at that.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important to celebrate those different styles and recognize that confidence can come in many forms.
I completely agree.
You don't have to be the life of the party to be a confident communicator.
I love that. So how can introverts leverage their natural strengths to become more confident speakers?
One really effective strategy is preparation.
Okay.
Introverts can really shine by taking some time up front to think through their ideas.
Makes sense.
Maybe jotting down a few bullet points or just mentally rehearsing what they want to say before a big presentation or an important conversation.
So it's about using that introspective nature to your advantage.
Exactly. Introverts often have this rich inner world where they process information deeply,
Right.
and by tapping into that, they can craft really compelling messages that resonate with others.
That's such a great tip. So it's not about trying to be someone you're not. It's about embracing your own unique style of communication.
Exactly. And remember, practice makes progress.
Oh, for sure.
The more you put yourself out there, the more comfortable you'll become with expressing yourself in English.
So ditch the myth that introverts can't be confident speakers, because it's simply not true.
It's time to rewrite that narrative.
I'm all for that. Now, another myth I hear a lot is that fluent English always means speaking super fast.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It's like we see those scenes in movies where everyone's talking a mile a minute,
Yeah, like an auctioneer.
and somehow they all understand each other perfectly.
Right, and it sets up this totally unrealistic expectation.
For sure. But it can be pretty intimidating when you're still learning English.
Absolutely.
So how can we break free from this faster is better myth?
Well, I think the key is to shift our focus from speed to clarity.
Interesting.
Because in reality, clear communication is far more important than rapid-fire speech.
Especially when you're speaking in a language that's not your first language.
Absolutely. It's about making sure your message is understood, not about winning a speed-talking contest.
Makes sense. So it's okay to slow down.
More than, okay, it's encouraged.
Really?
Yes. Taking a moment to breathe,
Okay.
to choose your words carefully,
Right.
and to articulate clearly can make a world of difference in how your message is received.
So it's not about rushing through your sentences. It's
Yeah.
about conveying your meaning effectively.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I can definitely get behind that.
It's about quality over quantity, right?
You got it. Now, tell me more about this power of the pause.
Well, think about some of the most captivating speakers you've heard.
Okay.
They know how to use silence strategically to emphasize their points,
Right, yeah.
to let their message sink in,
Yeah,
to give the audience a moment to process what they're saying.
that's so true.
It's like those pauses create a sense of anticipation and keep the audience on the edge of their seats.
It's like the difference between a rambling stream of words and a well-crafted speech, isn't it?
Exactly. And it's a skill that anyone can develop with practice.
So how can we start incorporating those powerful pauses into our own English speaking?
I would say start by paying attention to how skilled speakers use pauses.
Okay.
Notice when they pause,
Right.
how long they pause for,
Yeah.
and what effect those pauses have on the audience.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's about being more mindful of our pacing and using those silences to our advantage.
Absolutely. And remember, it's perfectly fine to take a moment to gather your thoughts before you speak.
It's not a race.
No, not at all.
Quality over quantity.
You got it.
Now, before we move on, is there anything else you want to add about the myth of fast English?
I would just say that embracing pauses can not only make you a more confident speaker, but also a more effective communicator.
Because it allows your message to really land with your audience.
Exactly. So next time you're feeling pressured to speak quickly, remember the power of the pause.
We'll keep that in mind. Okay, now we've tackled 2 big myths. What's up next?
Let's talk about another common misconception that can really undermine confidence, especially for language learners.
Okay, I'm all ears.
It's this belief that confident speakers never need to ask for clarification.
This one hits close to home.
I know, right?
I can't tell you how many times I've pretended to understand something just because I didn't want to seem clueless.
Oh, I've been there too.
Like nodding along while internally screaming, wait, what?
Exactly. But, it's so common, especially when you're trying to navigate a new language and culture.
Because you don't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation or make the other person feel like they're not being clear.
Right.
But is that really the best approach?
Actually, it can often backfire.
How so?
Well, because if you're not truly understanding what's being said,
Right.
you might miss important information.
Yeah,
Or end up agreeing to something you don't fully grasp.
that makes sense.
And that can lead to confusion and miscommunication down the line.
So what's the alternative?
Embracing the power of asking for clarification.
Okay, but how do you do that without feeling awkward or self-conscious?
Well, first, it's important to shift our perspective.
Okay.
Instead of asking for clarification as a sign of weakness,
Yeah.
we need to reframe it as a sign of strength.
Strength. How so?
Because it shows that you're actively engaged in the conversation.
Oh, interesting.
That you're genuinely interested in understanding what's being said.
Makes sense.
And that you're not afraid to admit when you need a little more information.
So it's a sign of intellectual curiosity and humility rather than incompetence.
Precisely.
I like that.
And in many English-speaking cultures, asking for clarification is actually seen as a sign of respect.
Oh, how so?
Because it shows that you value the other person's perspective and that you're taking the time to truly understand their message.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah,
It's about creating a more meaningful exchange, isn't it?
absolutely. It's about building a bridge of understanding rather than just nodding along and pretending you get it.
I love that analogy. So how can we get better at asking for clarification without feeling like we're interrupting or being a burden?
One helpful tip is to have a few go-to phrases in your back pocket.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Simple things like, would you mind repeating that? I didn't quite catch it.
Okay.
Or, could you give me an example? I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly.
Those are great.
Or even something as simple as, I'm not sure I follow. Could you explain that again?
Perfect.
These phrases are polite,
Yeah.
they're respectful,
Right.
and they convey your desire to understand without making the other person feel like they're not being clear.
I love that. I'm definitely going to start using those phrases more often.
Great, because remember, clear communication is a two-way street.
You got it. Anything else about asking for clarification before we move on?
Just this. The more you practice asking for clarification, the more comfortable you'll become.
Makes sense.
And the less power those moments of uncertainty will hold over you.
It's all about building that confidence muscle.
Mhm.
So let's ditch the myth that confident speakers never ask for clarification.
Right.
Because in reality, it's a sign of a true communicator,
Absolutely.
one who values understanding and connection above all else.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Welcome back to our deep dive into those sneaky little myths that can really zap your confidence.
You know, as we were talking about those myths in part 1, something really stuck with me about the fear of making mistakes.
Oh, what's that?
It feels like such a huge barrier for so many English learners,
It is.
myself included.
Yeah.
It's this constant worry about messing up the grammar, mispronouncing a word,
Right.
or just saying something that sounds, well, silly.
It's incredibly common, and you're so right.
Yeah,
It can be paralyzing for a lot of people.
absolutely. It can keep people from really participating in conversations, from expressing their ideas fully,
Yeah.
and really, from enjoying the process of learning.
That's the worst part.
It is.
Because it should be fun.
Absolutely.
So how can we kind of shift our perspective on this?
Yeah, how can we see mistakes as stepping stones rather than these huge stumbling blocks?
One really powerful technique is to focus on progress over perfection. So instead of beating yourself up for every little error,
Right.
celebrate those small victories,
Yeah.
Notice how much you've already learned, how far you've come, and how much clearer your communication is becoming.
So it's about shifting our mindset from like, I need to be flawless,
Right.
to I'm constantly learning and improving.
Exactly. And fluency isn't about eliminating all errors.
Right.
It's about being able to communicate effectively,
Yeah,
express your ideas,
Mhm.
and connect with others.
that makes a lot of sense and takes a lot of pressure off, I think.
For sure.
But what about those times when you do make a mistake
Yeah.
and you feel that like wave of embarrassment wash over you?
Oh, tell me about it.
How do you handle those moments gracefully
Yeah.
without letting them totally knock you off your game?
I remember one time I was giving a presentation to a group of international colleagues,
Oh.
and I completely blanked on the word for sustainable.
Okay.
I was fumbling, trying to describe it, and
Yeah.
I could feel my face turning red.
Oh, I could only
Those
imagine.
moments are so cringy, right?
Yeah, they are, but they happen to everyone.
They do. Even native English speakers have those moments
Right.
where they stumble over their words or have a brain fart.
Yeah, totally.
It's human.
It is.
But how do we kind of take the power away from those mistakes, especially when we're speaking a language that's not our mother tongue?
Well, I think by acknowledging that mistakes are natural,
Okay.
we take away some of their power.
So how did you recover from that sustainable mishap?
I took a deep breath, laughed it off,
Okay.
and said, you know what? My brain seems to be running on fumes today. What I'm trying to say is,
Nice.
and then continued with my presentation.
Yeah, you just rolled with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the audience actually appreciated the honesty and my
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Right. It makes you relatable.
And it helped us connect
For sure.
on a more human level.
Yeah. So those moments of imperfection can actually make us more relatable and engaging.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So remember those recovery techniques we talked about in part 1?
Yes. Pausing, breathing,
Right.
correcting ourselves if necessary.
Or even like injecting a little humor.
You got it.
Those strategies can help you regain control and keep the conversation flowing smoothly.
Right. So it's like having a plan for when those slip-ups happen.
Because they will.
They will inevitably.
Right, but it's not about being perfect.
No.
It's about knowing how to handle those moments when they arise.
Exactly.
Now, is there anything else you want to add about those inevitable mistakes?
Well, I would say try to see mistakes as feedback,
Okay,
not failures.
interesting.
Each time you make a mistake, it's an opportunity to learn and improve.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what was the specific mistake?
Right.
Why did I make it?
Okay.
And what can I do differently next time?
I love that. That's a really good way to reframe it.
Right. You turn it into a positive learning experience.
Absolutely.
And over time, as you make those adjustments and see your progress, your confidence will naturally grow.
I love that. It's like that confidence building cycle we talked about.
Exactly.
Action leads to progress, which fuels motivation and confidence.
Yeah. It's a beautiful upward spiral.
It
But
is.
remember, the more you practice speaking English,
Yeah.
the less intimidating it will become and the less power those mistakes will hold over you.
You'll start to see them as just part of the process.
Exactly. Like anything else in life, the more you do it, the easier it gets
Right.
and the more confident you become.
Totally. So if you're feeling stuck in that fear of making mistakes, remember these key points.
Okay.
Number 1, embrace the fact that mistakes are a natural part of learning. Even native speakers make them.
All the time.
No one's perfect.
Right. Number 2, shift your focus from perfection to effective communication.
So it's not about sounding like a textbook.
No.
It's about getting your message across.
Exactly. Number 3, use those recovery strategies when you do make a mistake. Pause, breathe, correct yourself if necessary,
Mm-hmm.
or use a little humor.
Don't let it derail you.
Don't let it derail you. And finally, view mistakes as feedback, not failures. Use them as opportunities to learn and improve.
I love it. It's like turning those oops moments into aha moments.
You got it.
So we've talked about the fear of making mistakes. But what about this idea that confident speakers never need to ask for clarification?
Oh, this is a big one. And, it's especially relatable for English language learners because there are so many nuances to the language, so
Wow.
many idioms, cultural references, things that can be really tricky to grasp.
Absolutely. And it can be so intimidating to admit that you don't understand something.
It can.
Especially when you're trying to navigate those tricky conversations.
Right.
But is that really the best approach?
Actually, it can often backfire.
Okay.
Because if you don't truly understand what's being said, you might miss important information.
Right.
Or end up agreeing to something that you don't fully grasp.
Yeah, that's happened to me before.
I think it's happened to all of us.
And it leads to those awkward situations down the line. So what's the alternative?
Embracing the power of asking for clarification.
Okay, but how do you do that without feeling awkward or self-conscious?
Well, first of all, we need to shift our perspective.
Okay.
Instead of asking for clarification as a sign of weakness,
Right.
we need to reframe it as a sign of strength.
Strength, I like that.
Yeah, because it shows that you're actively engaged in the conversation, that you're genuinely interested in understanding what's being said,
Right.
and that you're not afraid to admit when you need a little more information.
So it's about showing that you're intellectually curious
Right.
and that you value clear communication.
Absolutely. And, in many English-speaking cultures, asking for clarification is actually seen as a sign of respect.
Really?
Yeah, because it shows that you value the other person's perspective and that you're taking the time to truly understand their message.
That's a really interesting point, and it makes a lot of sense.
It does.
Because it shows that you're not just passively listening, you're actively trying to engage in a meaningful way.
Exactly. You're building a bridge of understanding rather than just nodding along and pretending you get it.
I love that analogy.
It really is about creating that connection.
Yeah, so how can we get better at asking for clarification without feeling like we're interrupting or being a burden?
Well, one tip is to have a few go-to phrases in your back pocket.
Yeah, give me some examples.
Simple things like, sorry, I didn't quite catch that. Would you mind repeating? Or, could you give me an example? I want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly.
Perfect.
Or even just something as simple as, I'm not sure I follow. Could you explain that again?
Those are all great phrases, and they're very polite and respectful.
Yeah, and they convey your desire to understand without making the other person feel like they're not being clear.
So it's not about saying, huh, or giving a blank stare.
Right. It's about having those tools to navigate those moments of uncertainty.
I love it. I'm definitely going to start using those phrases more often.
And you know what? The more you use them, the more natural they will become.
Right? Like anything else, it's practice.
And the less hesitant you'll feel about asking for clarification.
So it's like training our brains to embrace curiosity and clarity.
Right.
Rather than shying away from those moments of, I don't know.
Exactly. And remember, asking for clarification is not a burden on the other person.
Right.
Most people are happy to help.
They are.
And appreciate your willingness to engage in a meaningful way.
It's all about creating those connections.
It is.
So the next time you find yourself in a conversation where you need clarification,
Yeah.
don't hesitate to ask. Embrace it as an opportunity to learn and deepen your understanding.
I love that.
This has been so insightful.
It has.
And I'm realizing that so many of the insecurities I have about speaking English really stem from these myths that we've been debunking.
It's amazing how much power these myths can have over us.
It really is.
They creep into our subconscious,
Yeah.
and they sabotage our efforts without us even realizing it.
Right, but I'm feeling so much more empowered now that we've started to dismantle those myths brick by brick.
Me too.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
It is.
To help you see those myths for what they are. Just false beliefs that are holding you back from reaching your full potential.
Absolutely. And on that note, I want to hear from you, our listeners.
Oh, yes.
Think back to a time when you hesitated to ask for clarification. What held you back?
Yeah.
What were you afraid of?
Right.
And looking back, what could you have done differently?
Good question.
Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below.
We'd love to hear your reflections. And remember, we'll be back in part 3 to explore even more confidence-boosting strategies for your English learning journey.
All right, welcome back to our final deep dive into these confidence myths.
It's been quite a journey.
It has. And we've saved the big one for last.
We have, haven't we?
This is the one that I think can really hold people back.
Oh, absolutely.
And is that you're either born confident or you're not.
Right, like it's in your DNA.
Yeah, like you win the confidence lottery or you don't.
Exactly, and that's simply not true.
So what is the truth about confidence?
Well, confidence is not a fixed trait, it's a skill.
Okay, I like that.
And just like any skill, it can be learned,
Right.
developed, strengthened over time.
So you're telling me I can actually learn to be more confident.
Absolutely.
But how? It feels so elusive sometimes.
It comes down to understanding the confidence-building cycle and putting it into action.
All right, remind me about this confidence-building cycle.
Well, it starts with taking action, any action, no matter how small,
Okay.
that moves you towards your goal of becoming a more confident English speaker.
So give me an example.
Maybe commit to having one English conversation a week, even if it's just with a language partner online.
Okay.
Or record yourself speaking English for 5 minutes every day.
Right.
And notice how your pronunciation and fluency improve.
So start small.
Start small, build momentum,
Yeah.
celebrate those small victories.
I like it because it feels less overwhelming than trying to become a perfect speaker overnight.
It is.
So what happens after you start taking action?
You inevitably make progress.
Yeah.
And that progress fuels your motivation.
Right.
You start to see that you're capable of growth and improvement.
Yeah.
And that makes you want to keep going.
And that motivation then leads to
Confidence.
boom.
You start to believe in yourself
Mm-hmm.
and your ability to achieve your goals.
So it's like a positive feedback loop.
Exactly. The more you do it, the better you get, the more confident you feel, the more you want to do it.
It's like this upward spiral of confidence building.
Exactly. An upward spiral of growth, empowerment, and transformation.
I love that. So it's not about waiting until you feel confident to take action.
Right.
It's the action itself that creates the confidence.
You got it.
Mind blown. So what's one final piece of advice you would give to our listeners who are still struggling with that myth of, I'm just not a confident person?
I would say remember that confidence is a journey, not a destination.
Okay.
Embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and never give up on your dream of becoming a fluent and confident English speaker.
Beautifully said. So tell me, what is one action you are committed to taking this week to boost your confidence in English?
I think I'm going to try recording myself speaking for 5 minutes each day and really focusing on my pronunciation.
That's a great goal. What about you, dear listener?
We'd love to hear your commitments.
Share them in the comments below. And let's create a supportive community where we can all cheer each other on.
Absolutely, because remember, you are not alone on this journey.
And that's a wrap on our deep dive into confidence myths.
It's been a pleasure.
It has. And remember, keep practicing, keep learning, and keep believing in yourself, because you've got this.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the fascinating world of language learning.
Bye for now.